Hello, everyone. I'm just going to wait a minute while we get some people popping on the live here and get it up on my phone so I can see the chat. Let's see if it's happening here. Oh, does anyone else struggle with doing these live videos from a technical stance? Like, I'm perfectly fine talking to the camera and to people, but gosh, these get frustrating just setting them up. Okay, here we are live. Okay, let's make sure that I can turn that all up. Okay. Leah, there you are. Okay, so now I can see the chat. Now I can see you. Alrighty. So for those watching the replay, you can fast forward just a little bit to get to where I'm going to actually start talking. And Andrew is on here as well. Awesome. So go ahead if you are joining me live. Let me know where you're joining in from. I'd be so excited to know who's here and everything. Thanks, Leah. Um, yeah, so I am Libby Parker, the Broadway Dietitian. I also own a group private practice of dietitians specializing in eating disorders called Not Your Average Nutritionist. And so I'm here to answer any questions people have today about working as a private practice dietitian, working with performing artists and health facts for that, um, being a certified eating disorder dietitian, anything like that. I'm here. North Carolina, awesome. It's so weird. I can only see one thing. Montana, yay. Got people coming in. So, yeah, if you're just joining, please pop in where you're coming in from. And if you have any questions for me in the chat, and I will be checking periodically. But I'm going to go ahead and just kind of start out with my dietitian journey, how I got where I am. I have been a dietitian for about 10 years now, and it was actually kind of an interesting, maybe not interesting, but to me it was an interesting journey of how I got here. So I actually started college pre-vet. Oh, we got Ohio, Minnesota. I'm from Minnesota, Andrew. Um, yeah, so I grew up in Minnesota, started out college pre-vet in Wisconsin because I thought I was going to be an equine veterinarian, work with large animals. And unbeknownst to me at the time, was developing my own eating disorder. So, of course, that meant I was obsessed with nutrition and reading nutrition facts labels and all the things. If you know, you know. I'm not going to go into that, but decided to switch majors to nutrition. And that meant also switching schools. So, also, fun fact, while I was a pre-vet major, my minor was in musical theater at the time. I didn't get to take too many classes in that because I switched schools, but I think it would have been pretty impossible to do theater and be a veterinarian at the same time, just knowing now the lifestyle. So, if you're going into college and you're watching this, think about the lifestyle you want to have when choosing um, job prospects, career prospects. What kind of schedule do you want to keep? Getting called out at 3 in the morning in the middle of a blizzard, stick my arm up a horse's butt was not what I was going for. So switched majors to nutrition, transferred to the University of Minnesota Twin Cities, where I got my degree in nutrition and dietetics and a minor in leadership. And wonderfully, because yay science, which I know we stand for at Build Up Dietitians, um, because of science, I was able to mostly work myself out of the eating disorder by the end of college, at least behaviorally. I went on to have therapy afterwards, but it was incredibly beneficial for me to understand how the human body works, metabolism, all that stuff. Um, and so, yeah, I was pretty much behaviorally done by the time I was done with college and was not really sure what I wanted to go into. I knew it wasn't clinical. Did my dietetic internship at Cal Poly in San Luis Obispo, California. Met a local and got married and got stuck here. um, and I've had a lot of different jobs as a dietitian overlapping each other. I don't think I've ever had a full-time, like 40-hour-a-week job, which is kind of interesting, I guess. But I've had a private practice for almost 10 years. And my niche has both started and then completely grown into working with eating disorders. And last year I became a certified eating disorders registered dietitian through the International Association of Eating Disorder Professionals. Also in 2020, I hired my first dietitians to work at my practice. So I now own a group practice, and we are completely telehealth. We don't have a physical office anymore. This is my home office. I don't see clients here. I do all my work here though, and it's my happy place, my fortress of solitude. Um, but yeah, we are licensed to see clients in 22 states. And so that is the dietitian-y side of my business and kind of how I got here. We can go into any questions you have about any of that. But I know you're here because you're interested in the Broadway aspect of it. Like, what makes me the Broadway dietitian? How did I get to that? What does that mean? So, as I mentioned, I have an affinity for theater. I was a dancer growing up. I got into musical theater starting in sixth grade, but like officially in high school, and just always loved it. Oh, yeah. Oh, good questions. I will come back to your questions there, Andrew. Um, so once so end of college and during my dietetic internship, obviously didn't have time to do theater and things. I kept dancing through that time. But once I got my RD and got a little more settled, I got back into community theater. And that is where my heart is. I love, 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 love being in musical theater. I love the rehearsal process. I've learned to love auditioning. I enjoy all of it. Obviously, I love performing. Um, and, as I was doing theater and people knew I was a dietitian, I started getting questions from my castmates like, I'm been running from work straight to rehearsal and don't have time to cook dinner and I'm grabbing McDonald's or something like or I'm skipping dinner and I'm starving. How do I keep my energy up during rehearsals? What do you recommend? And then I started noticing both myself and other people having health problems as a result of kind of the rigorous schedule and complexities of stage life to the point where during one dress rehearsal I was in, I started getting into the first stages of heat stroke because I hadn't been properly taking care of my body. And luckily, I knew what was happening from my training um, and was able to make sure that that never happened again. And as I was starting to realize, um, like common questions people were having, common things like snacking and keeping up energy during long rehearsals and things like that, and other more complicated issues like avoiding digestive issues on stage or things like heat stroke, and then just the culture of theater. And as I especially was reading more about the professional world, there are a lot of scientific articles on like drug use and misuse in the theater world, such as like prednisone misuse, recreational drugs, alcohol, and smoking are very culturally used in the theater world a lot. Just the timing of everything being out really late nights, not necessarily having access to maybe the healthiest food choices, and of course, body image, body shaming in the theater world, eating disorders, all of that stuff. And as I was, coming to terms with all of this and learning more about it and seeing how it affected my body and the people around me, I started thinking about what if this could be more of a career thing. And so I went to Broadway Con in 2020 and had a table there with the Broadway Body Positivity Project, which, if you're at all interested in anything body positivity and theater, check them out. Great organization. I'm the resident dietitian for them as well, so I answer questions. And we had a table there, and people were approaching me saying, "Oh my gosh, no one else is doing what you're doing. There are no dietitians working with Broadway people, working with musical theater. There are a lot of dance dietitians, and there's a lot of fabulous dance dietitians, and I work with dancers as well, but there isn't anyone that was specifically in the theater world and can come from that background." I've gone on to also audition for Broadway and spend more time with those people and have some clients and things. So I'm really understanding that. So In 2021, I officially launched the BroadwayDietitian.com as a blog and a platform to start educating people on theater health, like eating during tech week and all of these crazy things that are going on. I have an online course called Whole Health for Performers, and I'm now working on a college course for performing arts students and a textbook to go with it that I am hoping to license at BFA programs nationwide. So that's kind of where I'm at with all of this. I absolutely love it. So I invite you, if you have any questions about any of this, please pop them in the chat right now while I'm here for the next about 20 minutes. And I did see some question coming in here, so I'm going to answer that. But that's a little bit of my background, where I'm at today with all of this. So I hope that was interesting. Okay, so Andrew from Build Up Dietitians was asking, well, great point to think about lifestyle hopes and work-life balance when considering a career. Yeah, super important. Do you ride horses and do you have pets now? Yeah, I go back to my veterinary lifestyle. So I do ride. It's been a couple years since I've been on a horse, but I had horses growing up. Love animals of every shape and form. I'm allergic to cats, unfortunately, even though they're very cute. But I have two dogs now. I have a golden doodle and a Maltipoo, and love them. They are super cuddly. And if you don't know those breeds, the nice thing about them, and one of the main reasons we chose them, is they are non-shedding. So anything poodle mix is really great for that. Yeah, spent a lot of time at the vet recently with my little dog having hip surgery. So I got to be in that world. Okay, another question came in. Do you approach theater clients like a sports nutrition consult, or is it more individualized based on the situation? Ooh, beautiful question. Yes, so I do consider it very similar to sports nutrition. I actually, I think I've coined the term, maybe someone came up with this before, theater athletes, because I think very stereotypically, and I think of this particular, if anyone watched Glee, there's this very particular moment where Kurt went to try out for the football team, and he says, I'd like to audition for the role of the kicker or something like that. And it really, I think, speaks to the stereotype that theater kids, theater people are not athletic and like don't do sports and, you know, just, stand up and sing or whatever. And that's so not true. To be good at theater, and especially if you're a dancer, but I would say, like, if you are in the theater world, if you are putting your body on stage, you are athletic. You are moving in ways that the general population doesn't. And depending on what you do, what level you're at, obviously that's going to be different, like different levels of sports. That could be like, I'm not a super sporty person, but like elementary school level t-ball up to professional level baseball and everything in between, we have the same idea with theater. So whether you're acting, dancing, singing, you're doing technical crew work, stage managers, set designers, directors, lighting crew, like everyone is really physical in different ways. So in that sense, we are looking very individually at the person of what is your daily life and schedule like? What movements are you doing? I think a lot of theater people, theater athletes, depending on what area they're in, are at high risk for repetitive motion injuries. So that doesn't just mean the dancers. That could be person that's doing the lighting or something. If you're doing the same movement day in and day out, not balancing out the muscles with cross training and maybe physical therapy, then that's definitely going to be affecting your health in the long term. We're definitely looking at nutrition like sports nutrition. So we were thinking, just like how someone would think of like a race day or a game day or something, how are we preparing for that, knowing that they can't, eat on stage and we need to avoid digestive upset and things like that? How are we staying hydrated and fueled through a performance? I think a lot of non-theater people don't understand that when you are in costumes under the really bright, hot stage lights and moving, you are at an increased risk of heat stroke, or you just get much hotter than it is in the theater in general. So if you're an audience member, a patron in the theater, it might be chilly. You might be wearing a coat or a wrap or a scarf or something because they keep it kind of cold in the theater. But when you're on stage, it is extremely, extremely hot. And then especially in like period pieces, you have all these heavy layers of costumes, and then maybe you're dancing and you're under these hot stage lights. You are sweating through things very quickly. You need extra electrolytes just like a sports athlete would. So we are approaching it very similar to sports nutrition. Um, so yeah, a lot of the like nutritional background that I'm pulling from is what I would look at for athletes. And then I'm tailoring it to the individual needs of what that person is doing in the theater. I saw a couple more questions come in. Okay, so let's see what questions we got here. Okay, I'm going to come back to the private practice one, but I got another one. Do you work with actors for movies or theater stage or both? And how are this the same or different? I definitely will work with both. I haven't had a lot of film actors. I do a little bit of local film work, so I do understand that as well. I think the lifestyle is extremely different. So when we're doing theater, so whether it is community theater or professional theater, those lifestyles are different. So if you don't know, community theater, usually unpaid, usually you're doing your normal like school or work during the day, and rehearsals will be nights and weekends, and shows are usually just weekends, right? So I would say an average community theater maybe does 4 shows a week when they're doing shows, and rehearsals will be 2 to 3 hours a night, most nights a week, maybe longer hours on a weekend day. But then you have like your normal life the rest of the time and you're running around. Professional theater, you might be rehearsing 8 to 12 hours a day, most days of the week. Usually you get 1 to 2 days off a week. And if you're doing Broadway, you're doing 8 shows a week once that's up, and you get 1 day off a week. So the lifestyles are very different when a professional performer is in just performance mode, when they're in their 8 shows a week. Um, that's like their only like job time. So the rest of the day they have to themselves, and they might have other like survival jobs, we would call them. So that can be taking up a lot of time. They might be going to the gym or doing other things. So they can be hopefully taking care of their body in other ways. I find that if your whole job is surrounding your body, you might have more time to take care of it. You also might have more pressure to try to fit a certain body type. So then we have more of the eating disorders popping up and things like that. And then in community, you might have less time to like prep food and go to the gym and do other things to take care of your body. But the pressure on the body is usually less. So, I mean, obviously anyone can have an eating disorder. With film, it's usually more condensed and intense. So you might have longer days and they might be all stacked together, but then you might have long periods of time off where you're not doing anything related to film. So I would think of that almost more as like two separate periods of life, like go time in, like you're in season for a sport versus off season. Um, so I would be thinking more in terms of like long term, like general lifestyle health during the off season, and then like during a filming day, what can you do to get through, keep your energy up? You're not just chugging coffee all day long, super long days. With film, you might be working really weird hours, like overnights, might have to get there insanely early in the morning, throwing yourself off your sleep schedule. So we're looking at a lot of different lifestyle stuff like that. What was the rest of that question? How are they same or different? But in general, I would say like nutritional needs are pretty much the same. Film, I would say, depending on what's going on, like maybe an action film or something where they're being super, super active, they would have, the high energy needs. But if you're just doing like a walk on role or something, like your energy needs are probably going to be much lower than a theater person, because theater, you're typically doing more rehearsal. Film usually has less rehearsal, depending. You just kind of are going in, you've read the script, and you're just gonna do a couple takes of it, and then you're not gonna do that scene ever again. Theater, you're doing the same thing over and over every day, sometimes multiple times a day. So those would be the differences with that. Um, do clients have time to refuel in between and during set changes? Yes and no, depending. So, big thing in the theater, big no-no is no eating in costume. Costumes, you cannot spill on them. Many of them cannot be just thrown in the washing machine. So, every theater will say no eating in costume, basically just water. So everyone should have a water bottle, absolutely. Like you should be drinking water every time you walk off stage, basically. Um, what some people do, and I've actually created blankets that say permission to eat back in my backstage blanket, is I created blankets you can buy, and you can like put a blanket up all the way, covering everything, and then have your snack that way. Um, but usually you're eating before you get into costume, like up until you put your costume on, you can be eating. And then at intermission, you can take your costume off and, put on street clothes and eat. But intermission's usually 15 minutes. That's also when you're going to the bathroom, you're changing costumes, you're redoing your hair, you're looking over lines, things like that. So that's more like where the blanket comes in if you need to eat something. So also like thinking about what kind of food is going to affect your digestion and stomach. You don't want to go on stage and have your stomach grumbling, have gas and bloating, especially if you have a tight costume. That can be hard. You don't want something that's going to make you run to the bathroom because you can't just leave stage. You want to make sure that it's sitting well with you and not like really hard to digest food. So I do recommend usually simpler carbohydrates going right onto stage. So things like pretzels or crackers, stuff like that is really great right before you're going to walk on because it's not going to be really difficult to digest. You're not going to want to eat like vegetables or protein right before you walk on stage because it's hard on your digestive system, dietitians, so we're thinking about, okay, during the day, several hours before we're getting ready to go on stage is when we're going to be getting in more of our fiber, protein, fats, harder to digest things. And then directly before going on stage is when we're eating more simple carbohydrates, making sure we're super hydrated, potentially having, sports beverages even depending on how much you're going to be sweating during the show. And then intermission, doing a check like, do I need electrolytes? Do I need more water? Do I need a snack? Making sure to empty out your bladder every chance you get because when you get on stage, you don't get to leave again. So those would be like considerations that I'm definitely educating on. Okay, so another question in here. What tips would you give someone who wants to start their own practice and how do you build clientele? Great, let me just grab a sip of water. Also, for that same reason of not spilling on costumes, straws are really great for doing costume stuff because then you can just suck up the water. You're not like potentially pouring it on yourself. So that can be helpful as well. Okay, starting a private practice. There are so many resources nowadays for starting a practice that were not available when I started mine. I started my practice in 2012. There was like one book from the academy on how to start a practice as a dietitian. There was not Facebook groups yet about this. Like no one I knew had really done it. So I did a lot by trial and error and it was not what I would recommend. Like I can tell you all the things not to do. I would say I could give you resources of people that would be really helpful. When I was transitioning to a group practice, I actually hired a group practice business coach, Nicole Goodrich from Anderson Nutrition, who helped me get set up for having employees. And then I've been in some masterminds like Adrienne Peck Souza's Fearless Practitioners to really kind of up level. But things that you need starting out, you need an NPI, a National Provider Identifier, which you can get for free there's a website for it. It's like your provider social security number, I guess. You need a business license, and that's going to be dependent upon where you live. What are the qualifications for that? You'll want to set up a legal structure for your business. Solo practice dietitians have options, and again, depending on your state, will depend on what type of business structure you want to set up. Most are usually sole proprietors or LLCs. I started as a sole proprietor and switched to an LLC when I knew I wanted to have employees, because you can't have employees as a sole proprietor. Some states I don't think allow you to be a sole proprietor, so just check, your licensure laws for business licensing and type of business you have. You'll obviously want a website and way for people to find you. I think nowadays it's easier than ever to market because of being online, but it's also really saturated. So you need to figure out what makes you stand out. What is your niche? Why should people work with you versus someone else? And I think that's, part of the Broadway Dietitian for me is it's really unique. No one else is really doing it right now. And it's your personality. Like, this is my personality. You're seeing me. I am not gonna be that person that has all those like nude and blush pink shades and is like, we're gonna go do meditative yoga together. Like, no, I'm bold, I'm flashy, I'm jewel tones. I'm gonna give it to you blunt. So like, you have to show your personality, and I think that's the best way to get clients. And then just networking. I'm not the best person at this part of it, so there are better resources out there for starting a private practice. But if that's something you're interested in, I wish you the best, because it is so wonderful. I think it's really important to know yourself, know if you work really well independently. It's incredibly different working for yourself than working for someone. If things aren't working, it's because of you. You have to do everything. It's long hours, it's low pay. You have to do it because you love it and because you know you're going to be motivated to do work on your own with no one pushing you. If you're not motivated to do the work on your own, even when you're tired, even when you don't want to do it, doing the things you really hate doing because it has to get done, then don't be an entrepreneur. But if that kind of stuff sounds exciting to you and you can't imagine working for someone again, then go for it, because it's also really awesome. You get to, within legal and ethical boundaries, do things the way you want to do them. I think private practice works really well for people who have a really strong ethical being about them. For me, integrity is number one. If my integrity, if my reputation goes, like, that is my number one thing. I will never compromise those things no matter what. Even if I never get paid another dollar, I will not compromise my integrity, my ethics. And I know that about myself. I know there are people who are not that way. And those are the people that usually are seen getting ripped apart. So know yourself, I guess. That's my best advice for that. I think we saw another question come in. Let's see. Okay. Okay, so I have another question, but before we come to the end of this, I just want to remind everyone how you can find me for more information. If you want to chat with me, if you want to see what I'm up to, what projects I've got going. So on Instagram, I'm at the Broadway Dietitian, and the website for the Broadway Dietitian stuff is thebroadwaydietitian.com. My group practice is Not Your Average Nutritionist, and it's notyouraverage.nutritionist.com, at Not Your Average Nutritionist on Facebook and Instagram. So definitely please check those out. I would love to chat with more of you. If you have clients who are theater athletes, I would be happy to work with them. I am licensed in California, New York, and many other states as well. So I love working with all my theater athletes. And then I had one more question come in. What has been the most challenging part of my career? So many things. So many things. I think getting consistent clients is hard. Usually once people find me and start working with me, they stick around for a long time because they like working with me, which I think says a lot and is great. But finding new people, getting them in the door, that's really challenging. just marketing in general. We're not taught how to market and run a business as dietitians in just, our normal education. So I've had to go on and figure out everything for myself, and I really wish that we would get more business classes in the dietetics program. I mean, health coaches and nutritionists get a lot of education on how to market instead of science. So, I mean, but why don't we? I think that would be really helpful. Because, yeah, like all the business stuff I had to teach myself. I love a lot of the business stuff. I love managing a business. I love tinkering with the website, all that kind of stuff. But marketing is really hard, despite loving to perform and do education. When I'm talking about things I know, like I love it. I'm actually an introvert at heart, so I hate going up to people and talking about myself and my business and, approaching providers or going to networking events. That really makes me cringe. So that's like the most challenging part for me is just having those initial conversations with people. Um, and yeah, I mean, there's a lot of difficult things, but that'd probably be the most challenging. So, any final questions from anyone? I'll stay on for another minute here, but I know we're coming up to the end of time. But it has been so great being on Build Up Dietitians. This is such a fun collaboration, and I love everything you're putting out there. They have some really great people that have been coming on and doing these lives, so you can learn about all different aspects of what dietitians are doing. So I hope that you are staying and checking out Build Up Dietitians. I hope you'll come over and see what I'm up to and have more conversations there. And I will be in New York this July if anyone's around. I'm actually presenting at Broadway Con on body positive nutrition for performing your best on stage and off. That'll be Saturday, July, I think 10th, if you're attending Broadway Con. So I would love to see you there if you're a Broadway person. And I am available to speak to groups on nutrition for theatrical students and performers. So that is one of my signature talks that I give to BFA programs and conservatories. So if you know a group that's interested in that, I would be happy to come speak to them. Let's see if there was anything else that came in. No, it looks like that was all of the questions. So I will say goodbye. Thank you all so much for being here. Have a beautiful day, and I will hopefully see you soon. Bye.